Piltdown Man, was promoted as the missing link between ape and man. Piltdown Man was identified by a fossil skull. Piltdown Man was in science books and taught to children in schools for almost 40 years before the skull was examined to see if it was actually authentic. When it was finally examined, it was determined that the top of a human skull had been attached to the jaw of an orangutan. The fossil had been stained and painted to make it look old.
100 years ago, the only human fossils yet known were a few Neanderthals, Cro-Magnon, and Homo erectus. Then an English attorney and amateur archaeologist presented bones and associated artifacts of what appeared to be an as yet unidentified species. British imperialists were generally accepting of the news, but French and American scientists were skeptical, doubting that the skull and jaw even belonged together. The British Museum touted the Piltdown Man as authentic, but the American Museum of Natural History displayed it only as a mixture of ape and man fossils, which is what it eventually turned out to be. There was no way to adequately examine such things back in 1915. Chemical tests, common today, didn't yet exist, and we didn't yet have a practical understanding of radiation, and before the first Australopiths were discovered, we didn't know exactly what to expect of the links that were then still missing between humans and the other apes known at that time. But as we began filling in the gaps in human evolution with thousands of legitimate fossils, a pattern emerged which left Piltdown an increasingly obvious anomaly. Consequently, it was taken off display and stored away almost continuously for decades. It lost importance in most discussions because, in light of everything else we discovered over the next few decades, it just never fit, and was eventually dismissed from the list of potential human ancestors for that reason. As the years wore on, criticism arose against everyone who ever promoted the Piltdown collection because there seemed to be so much wrong with it. Finally, in the 1950s, it was taken back out of the box and scrutinized via more modern means. First, fluorine dating revealed that it was much too recent, and it was shown to have been chemically treated to give a false impression of its age and mineral composition. Then it was finally determined that the jaw must have come from an orangutan, and that it had been deliberately reshaped with modern tools in a well-crafted and deliberate forgery. No one knows who did it either, and more importantly, why. Errors were already known and previously reported, but few ever suspected fraud because what would be the motive? Nearly everyone who stood accused was a man of high reputation and credentials. Maybe that was the motive. Maybe Piltdown Man was just a joke that had gone too far, but no one was laughing, and they weren't going to let it happen again.
The Nebraska Man, discovered in 1922, was accepted as an early form of mankind. But all that was actually discovered was a single tooth. It was later discovered to be a tooth from an extinct form of a pig. From one tooth, an entire fairy tale was invented and taught to children as fact.
Even before the Piltdown hoax was officially exposed, an American paleontologist earned himself a lifetime of embarrassment when he found a tooth from an extinct species of pig in Nebraska and mislabeled it Hesperopithecus. The cheek teeth of pigs and peccaries are fairly similar to ape molars, and this one was badly worn such that Henry Fairfield Osborn initially believed it to be human. But the real embarrassment came when he publicized his find in a popular magazine rather than submitting it to peer review first. Creationists like to say that scientists were as duped by Nebraska Man as they were by Piltdown Man, but they weren't. Everyone who saw the fossil agreed that it did look like an ape's tooth, but with only a couple tentative exceptions, the entire contemporary scientific community either immediately rejected the accuracy of Osborn's assertions, or they demanded more substantial evidence to back them. He obviously couldn't provide that evidence despite another 5 years of searching. Eventually, he came to the sad realization that his fossil probably wasn't really human after all. His more skeptical associate, W.K. Gregory, then published a formal retraction in scientific journals. Creationists often accuse scientists of contriving the illustration of Nebraska Man and of conjuring a whole skeleton and facial construct out of a single tooth that was never even human in the first place. But the fact is, the magazine commissioned their own artist's impression, and scientists of the day, including Osborn himself, immediately reacted with harsh criticism. As a result, the article was never reprinted. Now, even though Piltdown Man was eventually exposed by evolution itself, and even though Nebraska Man was simple stupidity honestly and voluntarily admitted, and even though there were no other such examples in the history of paleoanthropology, creationists still portray both of these events and many others as if they were all part of some ridiculous unified international conspiracy intended to fool the world into believing evolution over creation ex nihilo.
Java Man was a fraud. Ramapithecus was a mistake. Peking Man was another fraud. Neanderthal Man has been proven to be a race of modern men with severe arthritis. These and other examples should cause any prudent person to be at least suspicious of supposedly scientific reports about human ancestors. Another example worth mentioning is that of the peppered moth. Evolution textbooks declare most peppered moths were light-colored in the early part of the 19th century, but during the Industrial Revolution in Britain, the moth populations near heavily polluted cities became predominantly dark-colored. Experiments suggested that predatory birds ate the light-colored moths when they became more conspicuous on pollution-covered, darkened tree trunks, leaving the dark-colored variety to survive and reproduce. To demonstrate the camouflage of the dark moths, many books, when explaining evolution, have pictures of peppered moths on tree trunks. As ridiculous as it may seem, the pictures are themselves faked. Peppered moths do not land on tree trunks in nature. So where did the pictures of peppered moths on tree trunks come from? Dead moths were glued or pinned to the tree trunks. This fact has been known about since 1980, and still the fake pictures are being published in textbooks as proof of evolution.
Even though there's now been innumerable examples of natural selection acting under direct observation and a multitude of experiments gauging these, creationists are still trying to deny the first of these observances, the peppered moths of industrialized England. Creationists say that was a fraud too because the photos had to be staged, not for the normal convenience of photography, but because these creationists claim that peppered moths don't rest on tree bark. But a 30-year study by Cambridge University revealed that, in fact, most of them do.
You lied to me!
To some people in this world, money is more important than truth. And if they have to lie to you to keep their paycheck coming in, they will lie to you.
And so I am.